So I'm out here in Patagonia and we're about to head out onto the W Trek for some hiking and some photography. Along on this hiking trip, the only thing I have with me though is this 24 to 70mm lens, my camera body, and then this little tripod thing. It's called a vlog pod from Freewell, and this is going to be my little tripod. But that's all I've got. So let me show you the trail and see if this is enough to capture it like I want to. So we chose to do the W Trek from west to east, which means we would end our trip with sunrise at Los Torres. This means we'd need to get to Lago Grande to start the trail, and there are a couple of ways to do this. We chose the cheaper way, but it did involve a little more walking. This option consisted of getting a bus from Puerto Natales to a place called Puerto. From here you could board a catamaran and sail over Lake Puejo to Paine Grande. And as a bit of a bonus, on the way you would get some fantastic views of the Cuernos. Now from here we had to hike 11 kilometres to Lago Grande, which I suppose is kind of the real start of the W Trek. You can take a more expensive and slightly less reliable catamaran directly to Lago Grande Refugio from Hotel Lago Grande the other side of the lake, but the walk up isn't particularly difficult and you do get some fantastic views. We stopped for a little while at the Lago Grande viewpoint, which is the first spot where you'll get some great views of the distant glacier. A perfect point to aim for if you're in the park for a day hike. From here, it was a few kilometres more until our first campsite. So we made it down to Lago Grande, and we've actually treated ourselves to a pre-set up tent. In some campsites there was actually no option to even bring your own tent, there were no spaces left. So we've got one set up, which to be fair we're pretty grateful for. But on the way up, to be honest with you, there's not a huge amount of maybe like proper photographic opportunities. Like it's all beautiful and there's some great views of the glacier, and maybe if you had a longer lens with you that could be a great opportunity to use it. But I think one of the main photo spots is actually going to be on the kind of bridges further up along past the campsite. So what we're going to do is we're going to unload a bunch of our stuff here and then hike up with emptier bags up to those bridges and hopefully get some pictures. Heading north away from the campground and towards the glacier brings glimpses of floating icebergs, as well as 2 suspension bridges. Just past the second bridge, we came to our destination. And as the sun got lower and the light became a soft, warm glow, we were rewarded with some of the best views of Grey Glacier and definitely the best photography of the day. So we've actually ended up walking about 4 kilometres past the camp this evening, which was a little bit further than we expected, to be honest with you. Like there's 2 suspension bridges on the way here, and I've seen pictures in the past of the kind of glacier behind the bridges, so you could get pictures of people walking across with the glacier behind, but it looks like the glacier's receded so much in the past few years that that's not actually possible anymore. So we ended up walking maybe 100 metres past the last or the second suspension bridge, and we did end up with a bit of a better view of the glacier. We had to just about see the glacier in the background there. So yeah, the viewpoint is definitely better just past those suspension bridges. It's a shame that the glacier has receded so much, but I think I still got a couple of nice shots just kind of using the textures and the framing of the trees and all of that as well. But anyway, we've got another 4 kilometres to walk back to camp now, so I think it's time to call it a night and rest up for tomorrow. Day 2 had us starting the W Trek proper. Waking up at Lago Grande and making the hike back down towards Paine Grande, where we jumped off the catamaran the previous day. Felt like I should actually show you one of the refugios here in a bit more detail because they're pretty insane, to be honest with you. This is at Paine Grande, the kind of first refugio you get to as you come into the park. So a lot of people stay here for the W Trek or the O Trek, or will even come in and just stay for the day. and to do some day hikes and kind of use this as a bit of a base, or kind of do some out and back. So it is one of the biggest ones, and it's definitely one of the busiest ones. But as you can see behind me here, we have got some pretty nice views of the mountains. And we've got a bunch of kind of pre-set up tents over here. So there's lots of options of where to sleep. You can bring your own tent and camp out the back here. We've got the pre-set up tents. And then inside the Refugio itself, you've actually got the option to have a dorm room and a bed and full board or half board food. So it can be pretty luxurious, but even if you're camping, it's pretty luxurious, to be honest with you. And the thing about the W Trek now is that you can't actually wild camp along the way, and you can't use any of the free campsites anymore. They're not available. They've been closed off and not allowed. There's a fair few rules in the park now that you kind of have to stick by. But I mean, this is a great option, and the ones on this side of the park aren't particularly expensive either. And there's lots of other facilities here as well. Like you can go into the mini market and buy a beer or a can of Coke or have a glass of wine. You can order a pizza. There's a kitchen block just here behind me. We've also got a washroom with showers with hot water. So it's pretty luxurious, to be fair. And like I mentioned, we've got this pretty awesome views of the mountain peaks just behind the tents here. So I think this is also going to be a really good spot for sunrise and hopefully for a bit of photography. So we will be sure to get up and check that out in the morning. On day 3, we woke up to another frosty morning. So good morning, this is the third day of the W Trek this morning, and as you can see behind me here, we've been treated to some pretty nice light on the mountains, and we've come on down to the dock actually where the catamaran docks so you can get into the park. And there's some good little shots down here actually. This is definitely the best photography that we've had on the trek so far, and the 24 to 70mm lens is treating me pretty well. It's the only lens I've brought with me on this trek. Maybe this morning a slightly wider lens would have been nice, but to be honest with you, it wouldn't have been worth carrying the extra weight. But yeah, we've got some nice light. We're going to take a few pictures, and then after this we're heading to Francis Campground and the Britanico Valley. After sunrise, we set off on what would be our longest day yet, tackling the Britanico Valley and on to Francis Campground. So we're a few kilometres into the trail towards Francis and towards the Britanico Valley, and it's actually offered up some pretty good photographic opportunities. We've got some great views of the mountain ranges and some nice peaks where you can kind of get people silhouetted on top of. But back there, about a kilometre into the trail, there was this weird little sign that kind of said, go left or go right. It suggested that right would be 3 hours to where we want to get to, and the left-hand side would take 2 hours. But there were also these arrows kind of suggesting there was a one-way route. So we kind of followed the one-way route and took the longer route. My map says it's not really going to make much difference. And at first I was pretty unsure of that, but I think now I'm pretty glad we did, because we ended up walking kind of on the far side of the lake, away from the mountains. I think we got better views of the mountains as we walked past. But I'm coming into probably quite a unique problem for Patagonia per se, is that the weather's actually too good for some photography in a way, which is kind of unheard of in Patagonia. We've had beautiful weather, perfectly clear skies the last 3 days, no wind, and we're in mid-April right now. So it's been beautiful for hiking, but the kind of harsher light has made it a little bit more challenging for images. Obviously, if there was more cloud cover, you might kind of get moodier compositions and moodier shots and not have to kind of work in a way to get rid of, say, lens flare and harsh light and harsh shadows. And yeah, with that 24 to 70mm lens, the lens hood doesn't really work. It's a second-hand ex-rental lens. And I've noticed so much flare, so much glare going into my lens on this hike so far, which is a little bit ironic because I felt like I didn't need it, didn't bother ringing it. But we can't really complain. Perfect hiking weather, and I'm still getting some pretty good shots, better than I thought. We're now making our way up into the Britanico Valley. We actually dropped off a bunch of stuff down at Camp Italiano, or the old camp anyway. It's now completely closed, kind of at the junction, so you don't have to take everything up. This is definitely like the hardest part of the trail, I think. It's 5.5 kilometers with about 800 meters of elevation gain. And to be honest with you, so far the trail is actually not the best. Kind of walking up through sort of runoff and slippery rocks, still a bit of frost here. But we're seeing some pretty cool avalanches fall down from the mountains as we go up, which is pretty awesome. But also don't make the same mistake we did. A lot of the maps show that at Camp Italiano you're allowed to use camp stoves, but actually now you're not. And they're really strict on that here because there was a big wildfire back in 2011 and it wiped out a bunch of the native trees, started by essentially a careless tourist. So you can't cook down there. We were hoping to kind of have a warm lunch on trail before heading up, but unfortunately not. So we had a few pepperonis, a few cold dried sausages, and then going to make the climb and hopefully have a nice warm dinner when we get to camp.
The trail wound up through the forest with the constant rumble of falling snow and ice tumbling off the mountains around us. Dropping some PARKWAY to Italiano made us lighter on our feet and the trail more pleasant. As we climbed into the valley, the clouds began to move in, softening the harsh sun. And I did my best to capture natural frames amongst the autumn foliage.
So we finally made it up to Britanico viewpoint. A little bit misleading, some of that signage. It was actually about 6.5 kilometers to this viewpoint from Camp Italiano. There's a few other points along the way that I think different signs point to, so it's hard to tell how far you're going to go, but 6.5 Ks. It wasn't super bad, to be honest with you, but we've got 360-degree views all around us and back here as well. This is one point where if you had a wider angle, this is probably where you'd use it, but I've shot a couple of panoramas to try and stitch it all together. Light's not the best, unfortunately, but we've hiked all the way up here, so I'm going to get some pictures. Now just to head back down to where we came from Camp Italiano, pick up the rest of our gear and head on back to Camp Francis for the night.
With tired feet and aching legs, we made our way into Francis campground, just as the sun came down. Day 4. So this morning we woke up in our expensive and rather spider-infested tent in Francis campground and headed back out onto the trail.
So last night we stayed at Francis campground and it's day 4 and we're on the way to Chileno, which is the campground just before kind of Los Torres, the 3 Towers, which is that kind of famous sunrise spot that we wanted to end our hike at. But I thought I just had to say a little bit of contrast in regards to the camping around here. So the first 2 campsites are owned by a company called Virtus. And like I showed you, they're really nice. Like the tents are great, the pre-set up tents, you've got mattresses. The Refugios are fantastic. And to be fair, it was pretty reasonable. It cost us about $66 for 2 of us, including the tent and the mat rental. But for just camping, bringing your own tent's about, I think, $11 a person. So we stayed at Francis last night and you end up with these kind of essentially rooftop car tents, but on a platform in the woods. And there's nothing wrong with them per se on their own, but just the contrast in what you get for the money is ridiculous. Like we couldn't actually book our own tent in these campsites. Like it said we couldn't bring our own tent. So we ended up paying $90 a person. So $180 a night for a kind of very basic tent with a mattress in it. And in general, the campsite just wasn't that good. Like there's a washroom, there are showers with hot water, which is obviously fantastic and a bit luxurious. And there's a little bar that you can buy stuff, but for what you get to sleep in for 3 times the price, it's pretty insane. There's definitely 2 different outlooks from the companies on this trail, like Vertis, really offering a very good product at a very reasonable price. And then Los Torres, which operate the next couple of campsites, are really just trying to make as much money as possible, I think. And it's like your only option, so you have to pay it. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit whingy, but don't get me wrong, we would stay at a backcountry campground with very basic things or nothing at all, maybe a drop toilet. We'd bring our own tent quite happily. And we do this all the time in the Canadian Rockies. But you pay a park fee, it might be 30 or 40 Canadian dollars for the night. And you get to stay somewhere really beautiful. You filter your own water, cook where you want to. But yeah, a shame they kind of made it that expensive and that basic and kind of just force you into that position. But anyway, we've been treated to some amazing views already just out of the campground, all across the lake here and the mountains behind. And now we've got about 15 kilometers to go.
Although for the price, the campground was a little disappointing. The Cuernos section of the trail on the way to Chileno offered some of the best views and most varied terrain. Turquoise lakes, valleys and towering granite spires, even often all at once. The second section of the trail flattened out and weaved between mirror-like lakes and onto the warm glow of autumnal forests. Again, we couldn't believe our luck. The sun was shining and the wind was still. It didn't even pick up on the way through Windy Pass.
So this here is Chileno campground. And as you can tell, it's those same kind of rooftop car tents on platforms. It's definitely a bit better than Francis. It's a bit nicer laid out and it's definitely more scenic. We're right in amongst the woods here. And if you can see all the fall colours in the trees here. And then the restaurant and cafe is just kind of down there. So everything is a little bit closer, which is obviously really nice. But one thing to take note of, you can see maybe just up here, up there, there's a couple of pads, right? So there's about 5 of them on this campsite. Those are the tent pads where you can bring your own tent. And obviously that's why we weren't able to book them, is because there's only 4 or 5 of them at each campground with these guys. So they're not really giving you the opportunity to actually bring your own tent. So you are really going to be staying in one of these. But yeah, this one's much newer and isn't full of spiders like our last one is. So we're pretty happy about that. But we got here about 4 p.m. after kind of 6.5 hours on the trail. And about 16.5 kilometers from Francis. Starting to feel like a longer day just because we're on day 4, but yeah, gonna rest easy. And then tomorrow is hopefully the big one. Sunrise up at Los Torres.
Day 5. A very early start for sunrise meant starting our hike in the dark. Today's goal was the famous Las Torres.
So this is day number 5 of the W trek, and this is definitely one of the highlights of the trek, which is why we left it to the end. If you're traveling west to east, you can spend sunrise here at Los Torres. This is also definitely one of the highlights for photographers on this trail. And this is the first time I've actually used a tripod. I used that little vlog pod, that tiny little tripod. I used it for some long exposures, and I'm super glad that I didn't bring a full-scale tripod with me for the last 5 days, because it would have been a lot of effort to carry that all with me, to be honest with you, over the last kind of 80 kilometers to get here. But what a way to end the trip, with sunrise here at Los Torres, down at the lakefront. But from here, it's 5 kilometers back to camp, the way we came, and then 5Ks from there back to the bus, back into Puerto Natales. But what a way to end the trip, with sunrise with a view like this. And hopefully you found some of that video useful. If you have any questions about the W trek, feel free to leave those in the comments below. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. And we'll just finish this 10K hike back to the bus.